Hello everyone, my name is Eula. I'm one of the instructors for EECS 280, and I want to make a video kind of explaining the command line, how to use it, why you want to use it, and how to get started with project 1 using the command line. So here we have my desktop and I'm using a Mac, so I'm going to open up the terminal application, and this is my command line. So I can hit enter, and the command line is just a place where you can interface with your computer through written commands. So this is in contrast to what you've probably done before, just navigating your computer with a Finder window and clicking. So for example, I can go into this folder by double clicking. Here's a bunch of stuff. I can go backwards. You can do similar things just through the command line. So let's start by doing pwd. So that tells me what current folder I'm in. And when you use the command line, people may use the word directory, and that is the same thing as a folder. So I'm currently in the Eula Shots directory. And I can do ls, and that'll tell me all the directories or files inside of the current folder directory I am in. And then you can navigate to directories or folders, right, by doing cd and then the name of the folder you want to go to. So I want to go into the desktop. So here we go. I'm going to do pwd. You can see I'm now in the desktop folder. I can hit ls, and you see these two folders, soar and clean me. So I'm in the exact same place in the command line now that I am in my Finder window. Right, we have these two folders, same as here. And from here, let's make a folder for EECS 280 and then for project 1. So to make a folder on the command line, you use the command mkdir, and then you name your folder. So I'm going to name it EECS 280. And as you can see in my Finder, it actually created the folder on here as well. So if you open it up, it's empty, which is normal. If you do ls on here, now we see that folder's here as well. We can go into that folder by doing cd EECS 280, right? And this is the same as just being in the Finder and double clicking the file or the folder name. Okay, so now we're in this folder. So now let's use the command line to download the starter files. So let's move this over here. Okay, so this is the setup tutorial, and this kind of walks you through how to set up the terminal and the command line on your own computer, which we're gonna skip for now. Here's some commands, and here is the Wget or the Wget. So Wget is the program that we're gonna run that's going to pull these files from the link that's after it onto your computer. So I'm going to open up the terminal. We can have this open as well. And I'm going to paste that command. And as you can see, it downloaded from the internet these starter files. These starter files are currently zipped together. So I also want to open them, right? So I can actually see the files. So I'm going to do the command next, which is the tar functionality or program. So we're going to do that. And there we go. That made this folder called starter files, which now has all my files in it. From the command line, if I do an ls, we see that folder's right there. We can cd into it, starter files, do an ls again, and here are all those files. Great. So another thing you can do from the command line is actually compile and run your code. So in C++, that's two separate steps. And the first step, right, is the computer taking all your files, individually compiling them, and then linking them together. And then the second step is actually running what was created from the compilation on your computer and actually running your code. When you use a visual debugger, that's usually just one press of a button, but it's actually doing two things. Okay, so in the command line, you actually have to do these things separately. So let's take a look here. If we go back to the project 1 specifications, yep, and we go here, this is the command to compile your code for the stats tests. So this first line here is that first step of compiling, and we're going to use something called G++, which is the program that's going to compile your code. The things next are flags or settings that we want you to use for this project. And then we list the CPP files that we want to link together. So for this step, you want to include all the .cpp files that include the functions that you'll be using. So in this case, we have stats test.cpp, and that's going to have our main function. And so the code is going to run, it's going to run this main function, and it's probably going to run into trying to run the function like mean or standard deviation. So the computer needs to know how to actually implement those functions. And that information is going to be from stats.cpp and p1library.cpp. So that's why we need to include those two files as well. And then we have this -o, and after that we have the name that we want the computer to name the executable that it's going to create through this compilation process. And this can be anything. We decided to call it statstest.exe. And so that's the compilation process. The next step is actually running your compiled code. So that syntax is // and then that name of that executable that you created in the line before. Great, so let's give this a go. So I'm just going to copy this first line, go back to my terminal, make sure I'm in the right folder. Yep, so I'm in the folder with all my files, and I'm going to paste that in. Okay, so I got 2 errors. No such file or directory as statstest.cpp and no file called stats.cpp. So if we look at the ls, right, we see the files in that folder, and that's true. We don't have a statstest.cpp and we don't have a stats.cpp. So let's make those. I think it's easier from the Finder window. So I'm going to do it from here. So the first thing is we want to rename this file. Where's that? Yep. And get rid of that starter. We're going to use CPP. Great. So now we have that file, and we also want a stats.cpp. So if we go back to the tutorial, I'll do a quick find stats.cpp. Here we go. So under the starter files, we gave you kind of starter code for stats.cpp. So I'm just going to copy that. And now back in my terminal and my Finder, I'm going to make a .cpp file. So I'm going to do that by just duplicating one that's already there. I'm going to open it, delete everything that's in there, paste in stats.cpp, save, and then I'm going to rename it to stats.cpp. Great. Okay, so now we have those 2 files. Let's try compiling. Okay, so now it worked. So this step, it's also going to tell you any compilation errors. So if you miss a semicolon or something, it'll show up here. In our case, it worked fine. So if we look again at our files, we can either do ls or look at the window. We now have these 2 files, statstest.exe and this one, the dsym, just ignore that one. So this one here is the executable that the computer made from compiling your files. And it looks like this. So this is in a format that the computer can read and run. So the next step, right, is running that executable that we just made. So, right, we called it statstests.exe. Oh, I spelled it wrong. Stats tests. There we go. Okay. And this worked. So this gave us the output of running the code, right? And we're running stats tests. So if we open up that file, with Xcode. Here we have that. And so this is running this main function, which is calling the stats some small data set. And in here, we're printing out this line, which is what we see here. And then we do some stuff with the vector. And then here we call a function called sum, which is in stats.cpp. So let's open that up. Here we go. And here we can see, here's that function that we called sum. And on line 14, we just have an assert false because we haven't written the code yet. And that's exactly what this output tells us. It tells us the function sum in the file stats.cpp. On line 14, we hit an assertion. So this is what you want the computer to do. Yeah, so that's kind of how you get started with project 1. So why do you want to use the command line, right? Because as I'm showing you all this, I'm also showing you and telling you that you can do a lot of this with just clicking and using your computer interface as you're used to. So there's a few reasons you want to use the command line. One, it has a lot of powerful programs that are either very difficult or hard or impossible to do with just clicking around. For example, like Wget, the Wget, there's also Valgrind. In the future, you might want to use it for compiling other programming languages. So I use the command line exclusively for Python and running those programs. So it's good to get familiar with it and understand it. For this class, you need the command line because it's a way of logging into your Kane account and logging into that Kane system. So Kane is the engineering computer system that everyone in this class should have an account to. And you can basically use the command line to remote access the file directories in your computer through Kane. So it'll be different files, different directory, right? And you can navigate those files and directories through the command line using those commands like pwd, ls, cd, and so forth. And the reason you want to log into Kane is Kane is the same environment as the autograder. So what happens sometimes is students come in and their code works perfectly fine on their own computer, but it fails the autograder. So in order to check that doesn't happen to you, you want to SSH or remote log into Kane through the command line. And then you want to copy over your files for the project from your computer to that Kane computer. And those instructions are in the setup tutorial. And then from Kane, while you're in there, you want to run the code, compile it and then run it. So using this G++ command and then running it, and to make sure that your code compiles and runs well in the Kane environment, which is also the autograder environment. In future projects, you're also going to use the command line to do things like the automatic style checking, the address sanitizer, as well as Valgrind, which is going to help you catch a lot of really hard to find bugs in future projects. Yeah, so that's kind of how to use the command line, why you need to use it, and just how to get started with it for EECS 280. If you have any questions, please post on Piazza or come to office hours.